Warrior Health News Podcast is here with Dr. Friedson from the Milken Institute. Thank you. We would love to hear some of the work that the Milken Institute has been doing when it comes to clinical trials and making sure we have demographic diversity in clinical trials. Would love to highlight, number one, your organization, and then number two, the report that's coming out as well.
Yeah, so the Milken Institute, we're a nonpartisan think tank. We work in a few different areas. The research department is where I live, and I'm our head of health economics for the research department. So work on projects related to the healthcare sector, health insurance sector, public health, things like that. Clinical trial diversity and demographic balance is super interesting. We actually just put out a report at the end of last year on clinical trial diversity and balance. One of the most interesting things in this is that we really don't have a good grasp on where or even if we have a problem within clinical trials. Mm-hmm. Because the public reporting website, clinicaltrials.gov, which lists all of the clinical trials data and includes data on demographic balance for every clinical trial that has been run, is incredibly limited with regards to demographic information. That in order to get the demographic information, a trial has to upload their results, and only about half of the trials that are registered on clinicaltrials.gov upload their results or have up-to-date uploading. And then of those half that upload them, only about another half includes any demographic information beyond gender of the participants. So
that's like a huge miss.
It's a huge gap in our understanding. So you can run data analyses on demographic balance within clinical trials, but you're already going to be doing this on a very limited amount of data. So the very first thing that you can say with regards to clinical trials and can we do better is just we need to do better with data collection. That if we want to know to the extent that we need to improve, or even if we need to be improving, we need to get a better grasp on who is participating in clinical trials, when, and what types of trials.
No, that's very important. And for folks who might not be aware, what is the website again that you mentioned?
Clinicaltrials.gov. It's the public clearinghouse for clinical trial information. So if you're running a clinical trial, if you're running a drug trial, you're required to upload all of your information. Then other types of observational studies, device studies, things like that, you're required to put some basic information, but you're not necessarily required to upload your results. Mm-hmm. Results uploading is when people are supposed to upload demographic information. Demographic information, though, has a somewhat squishy definition with regards to what is included. Mm-hmm. Most of the time when demographic information is uploaded, it's only sex or gender.
Wow. And then, that's the basics of what they have to...
That's just the basics of what we were able to see when we scraped all the data out of the website, right? So the report that we have up looks at, about 20 years of data coming out of that website. And you can go to our website at, milkeninstitute.org, and you can learn about, read the report for yourself.
Yeah, we're excited to see this report, and I'm definitely going to be checking out that website to know more about clinical trials for sure. And for folks, there's a ethical obligation to making sure that there is more demographic diversity in people that are in clinical trials. But of course, I don't want to steal your thunder. You probably know a lot more about this than me.
I mean, there's definitely some ethical concerns, right? Because if you have treatments that have different types of presentation based on some demographic factor, based on genotype, or based on the social determinants of health that one population happens to be living in versus another type of population, and your clinical trial isn't capturing that population that has a different effect of the treatment, then you're going to be engaging in medical practice based on imperfect information for what you're going to get. So knowledge gaps can lead to treatment gaps to the extent that there is variation in how a compound or a medical procedure presents itself within a population. So you want to make sure that all the relevant populations that you're going to be that you're going to be trying to treat with your drug or your medical treatment, that they're represented within your clinical trial so you know what you're going to get when you take this thing out into the field. The other part of this is that there's also a question of, there's also questions of fairness that you just don't want to be leaving people out when, you have a social contract that says that we're going to be giving money to help the population, and we don't want one part of the population to be disproportionately disadvantaged.
No, absolutely. And I like how you talk about fairness too. So many people make it more complex, but it's just fair to have equal access to be part of these clinical trials in the first place.
You want to have equal access to the extent that a population is represented in the actual disease, right? I don't think we need to have perfectly equal access in between genders or sexes for ovarian cancer studies, because the presentation rates are just terribly, terribly different.
Yeah.
But to the extent that a population is represented in a disease population, you want that population to be in your clinical trial.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And is Milken Institute doing anything to ensure transparency and also ensure that people feel comfortable, right, in knowing what they're walking into? Are there any resources that they can point to when they say, I'm not even sure where to start in this, but I know I want to be part of a clinical trial someday?
So this is not something that the Milken Institute does itself. There are other institutes out. So let me rephrase that. There are nonprofits out there whose job is to be clinical trial databases.
Yeah.
And what I mean by this is not a database of clinical trials, but a database of potential patients, so that they're lowering the cost of trying to get a patient matched with a clinical trial when that patient is part of a group that traditionally has barriers to getting involved. So there are organizations that exist that do this type of work.
Perfect. And so it's important for people to do their research to figure out where those databases might be, and also some of those organizations that might be in the local community.
If you're worried about being left behind, then one of the things you can do is get yourself registered with a patient database for things that you know that you're affected by, so that it eases lowers the cost of trying to get you matched into a clinical trial. The other thing that a lot of the sector is starting to get involved in, and the Milken Institute is involved in some of these discussions, although I can't talk about forthcoming things, is the concept of decentralized clinical trials, and the idea that, just as we have, there may be local social things that make it more difficult to be involved in a clinical trial, there's also just physical distance.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the idea of getting clinical trials that are available outside of just academic medical centers, and getting them into community health centers or community pharmacies, things like that, so that it's just lower time cost to get people involved.
Absolutely.
And so this is an area that I find really fascinating, and that there may be work coming out in the future about.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that. And one thing I'm walking away from this conversation is, sign up for these patient databases for the things you are interested in, or the things that affect you. And I think that's a very important small thing people can do.
Absolutely. And if you're part of a patient community, one of the best things you can do is talk to your own patient advocacy group, right? That different diseases have their own respective foundations, and these foundations do help get patients involved in clinical trials. So if you are part of a disease, if a disease is part of your personal identity, then getting involved in the patient community is a good way to help lower these costs, because you don't have to do these things by yourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. And that's something, I think it's something simple and it's something actionable, but also helps us move this work forward in a very critical way.
Yeah, there's no need to be alone.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. We appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.
Thank you.